Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Cross, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. Let's talk about what we're doing today, because today we have another spectacular guest. He's a Vanderbilt University graduate and currently works as the founder, partner, and CEO of Spivey Consulting. He's held past positions as a board of directors member of Law School Transparency and as an assistant dean at the University of Colorado Law School. Finally, he's the host of Status Check with Spivey podcast. Excited to have him on the podcast today, Mr. Mike Spivey. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today? Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast, and ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
I'm doing well. I appreciate you having me on. I know you're popular in this space, so let's roll.
Absolutely, Mike. Now, before we get started, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Well, you did. I think you did a good job, so thank you. What I'd add is I started my academic career teaching ethics, business ethics at the University of Alabama. I then went to Vanderbilt Law School, where I was getting my doctoral degree. I took a law school class as part of my degree in higher education leadership. I'm going to be very immodest. I'm going to brag, and then I'll tone it down for the rest of the podcast. I what's called booked the class, which means I got the highest grade in the class. So a small trivia piece, my law school GPA is a 4.3. I have an A plus in the one class I took. I have a feeling if I took any other classes, the C's would cancel out that 4.3. So I opted out of taking any more law school classes.
Well, listen, Mike, I'm happy that you didn't take any more classes because you can keep that perfect GPA for the rest of your life. You can put it on your gravestone if you really want to.
I've asked him. I said, don't put anything about me as a person. Just put a random GPA that no one cares about.
Mike Spivey, 4.3 GPA.
Right.
Exactly. So, as people heard in the introduction, you indeed did not get your JD. You took your one class. You were not a practicing attorney, but you represent just another way to get into the law, to get into law school. It's just another path for people out there that they can explore within the legal field. And that's what we love to talk about on this podcast. That is the tagline of this podcast, that there is no straight path to the law of law school. There is only your unique journey, and you certainly have one right here. Now, we start at Vanderbilt University. You graduated with a degree in philosophy and psychology, a little bit just like myself, half like myself. I'm a philosophy major as of right now. And then you went on 3 years later, you were at the University of Alabama, you got your MBA. So can you sort of take me through those years and how you were sort of figuring out what you wanted to do with your career?
Yeah, and I didn't know. My whole life I've been told by my parents, who both grew up in the Deep South, get into a good school, get into a good college. So in my mind, I did what I was told to do. They never said the follow-up step, which was also like have an idea of what you want to do for a living and do well in college. So I just took a bunch of classes. I took all these philosophy classes because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I never, in case I ever run for political office, I don't want to be caught in a trap. I took all the psychology courses, but I never declared my major. That's how lazy I was. I could have walked into the registrar's office and have a double major, and instead I just took all these annoying stats psychology class and ended up with a philosophy major. The psychology is actually what I've taken with me for the rest of my life. The philosophy, to a discussion you and I had earlier, I still read quotes and books by philosophers, and I think it's interesting. I graduated and went off and worked in the business world for a year and decided that kind of sucked. teach their own. And I went and got my business degree as part of that and said, well, if I'm not going to work in the business world, what am I going to do with this business degree? So I taught business ethics. That led me to going to get my doctoral degree, which led me into this whole law school administration track. I worked at Vanderbilt Law School, had a wonderful mentor named Kent Siverud, who was Vanderbilt's dean. And he went on to Wash U in St. Louis, another great law school, and hired me to follow him there. And I was in charge of multiple things there. And then went on to CU and was in charge of multiple departments there. And I said, I like this law school stuff and this administration stuff so much. Why don't I make a company that helps make law schools better and helps make law school applicants better? So it was a squiggly line. It was not a straight line. I had no idea. If you had told me when I was 16, you're going to run a company of 35 people that helps 1,000 people a year get into law school, helps 10 law schools in 2 universities a year get better, I would say, I don't know who this person, time traveler, is, but he is crazy. So clicking on your biggest point, my path to where I am did not go through a JD. It was not pre-planned. It was life. We plan, and if there's a God, that God laughs. My plan is not direct. It just took me everywhere.
No, I couldn't agree more. If I look back at even like 18-year-old Nate back then, you could ask any one of my friends, any one of my family that this is what I'd be doing today. They would be like, no, there's no way. There's literally no way. But
what would they say you'd be doing?
Oh, I don't probably honestly, I don't even know. I would have to ask them. I would honestly have to ask them. And I think even like the other day talking to my brother, we were kind of talking about what I'm doing now, and he's like, yeah, dude, like honestly, like I had no idea what you were going to do. Like when you were in high school, I had no idea. And the fact that you're doing this is very impressive, but he's like, could have never predicted it. Never in a million years. But going back to Vanderbilt, you got your higher education degree, and then you found yourself end up at Vanderbilt University Law School. You were an associate director for law school's admissions for 8 years. Now, how did you find yourself involved with the law school? How did you how did your path take you there?
Yeah, it's really interesting. When you go get a PhD or a doctoral degree, they often give you money. They pay you, but you have to go work. In my job working was at the law school, and I was reading admissions files, and I got really into admissions. Admissions is kind of my life calling. I love the nuances and the vectors of law school admissions and admissions in general. So what happened was I was getting my doctoral degree with a research area in goal setting and higher education leadership. I switched from full-time doctoral to full-time law school administrator and part-time doctoral. And that took me all the way up to the assistant dean level at the law schools. And my life goal at the time was to be a college president. I saw that the higher up, and this might be good advice for some people if they listen. Most people won't listen, but you have to figure it out yourself. The higher up I got, the less freedom and the less choice I had. So every night I was looking at my next day's calendar on my phone. And my assistant had scheduled me 8 to 12 meetings. And I didn't know a single name of the person I was meeting with. And that wasn't the life I wanted to live. I said, I'm going to get off the treadmill and see what happens. So I got off the college president track treadmill and got on the entrepreneur business owner treadmill. And by just luck and a lot of work and a lot of striving to be better every day, we've created this company that is, mid-sized, 35 employees, who help thousands of people a year. And it's incredibly rewarding to be part of a business where I care deeply about my teammates at the firm, and the firm cares deeply about our clients, and we can really try to make a dent in, their legal career, a positive dent, I should add.
So in getting off the treadmill, getting off the college president route and going this different entrepreneurship route, speaking to all these lawyers that I've had on this podcast, they always talk about they have that itch to go hang their own shingle, to start their own company, to start their own law firm. It seems you yourself had that similar itch. Did you have that similar itch, and how did it sort of appear? Did you always have a sort of a want to be an entrepreneur, to have your own business, anything like that?
No, I actually did not. I think this is fascinating. the genesis of the Spivey Consulting Group was the birth of message boards. And as a law school administrator, I would read about my school and at times myself on these message boards. And when I saw people giving admissions advice, it was an applicant giving another applicant admissions advice. It was 9 out of 10 times like you would want to do the opposite. Because how do you know how to craft an application to law school when A, you've never done it before, and B, you've never been on the other side deciding who gets admitted? So it was 3 or 4 years of reading horrible advice online, given with a great deal of confidence. If you do this, you will get into Yale Law School, but you would actually want to do the opposite of what the person was saying. I was like, oh my goodness, there's a market for good advice from someone who's actually made admissions decisions. And I actually thought I would fail. I gave myself 2 years, and I said, if in 2 years this thing doesn't take off, I'm just going to go be a associate dean, college president. But it didn't fail. It took off.
So you were an assistant dean at Washington University in St. Louis. You were there for 3 years. And then the following year in 2012, you were the founder, partner, and CEO at Spivey Consulting Group. Now, what exactly led up to you beginning this consulting group?
Well, again, it was the amount of disinformation in the marketplace. My calculation was if there's this much bad advice, there has to be a market for someone who was on the inside, knows the process. And that's why I wrote a book. I mean, there's a lot of people who do what I do. Nate, you go by Nate, right?
I go by Nate.
Yeah. There's a lot of people who do what I do, Nate, but very few actually made admissions decisions. It's a lot of disgruntled lawyers or people who went to law school who never went and worked in admissions. So maybe they get the right some of the time, but how would they know how admissions offices make decisions? We do. At Spivey Consulting, we have over this is going to sound like a sales pitch. We're full right now. We don't need business at the moment. So this is not a sales pitch. We have over 250 years experience in law school admissions. So we hire people at our firm who have made admissions decisions, and then we help applicants craft the best statement. Going back to your original question, there was a need in the marketplace for real-time people who have real-time admissions experience to say, hey, this is where you're listening to false myths online and you're going in the wrong direction. And this is where you're using your authentic voice and talking about things that matter to you. And let's double down on this direction and craft a beautiful application, submit that application. Let's prep you for these interviews. We know what's coming. We know what they're going to ask you about. Let's prep you for these interviews. You're going to crush your interviews. You're going to crush your application. I don't do test prep. It's on you to get the good LSAT and the good GPA. We're going to submit a freaking A+ application. And if you're right on the bubble, if the school's median GPA is a 3.7 and the median LSAT's a 165, and you have a 164 and a 3.8, we're going to do everything we can to get you the admit, not the waitlist or the deny. And to me, I get really that's like a great feeling when we do that. We also help colleges, universities, and law schools get better. So we hit it from both ends.
I think what's so fascinating about the sort of value proposition that you're giving to people is like, we'll give you all you need for these distinct parts, but you have to do your part as well. You have to have that high GPA. You have to have that high LSAT. So not only are you getting people that are in need of this help, but you're getting people who are great prospects and who will use your advice and actually implement whatever you give them, and they will actually use it and go on to have success and all that. But of course, in creating this consulting firm and going through this journey, there's, of course, always some need for help, some mentorship. As you said before, one of your favorite mentors. Can you talk about how important mentorship has been for you? And as just a sort of an additional question, how would you sort of frame mentorship? What's the best frame for mentorship for people going through their career and trying to figure out what to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't think like my experience in high school was I had these high school football coaches screaming at me and these high school baseball coaches screaming a little less vocally, and my indoor track coach hardly ever screaming, but those seemed like mentors. But screaming, of course, isn't mentorship. What mentorship is someone who's really good at their profession, taking you under their wing and saying, I want to see this person succeed. And I had it done with me. I had someone named Kent Siverud, who's the chancellor of a major college now, to take me under his wing and teach me how he made decisions. He clerked for Sandra Day O'Connor. He was in charge of the $22 billion BP oil trust fund that President Barack Obama called him directly and said, can you be in charge of this? He was the dean of two top 20 law schools and now is a college president / chancellor. So he had a lot of experience in how to make strategic decisions that came to him from Justice O'Connor. And he passed that down to me. This is how, Mike, this is why I'm making this decision for this law school. This is why I'm making this decision for this university. And then I did the same thing in my firm. I hired a 19-year-old named Anna Hicks Hako, who's now 30 and the president of our firm. And for 11 years, this is mentorship. For 11 years, when I made big decisions, I was on the phone with Anna right after the decision saying, this was the problem or the strategic decision. These are the variables I took into consideration, and this is why we did X, Y, and Z. So it's really having someone, in my family tree above me, explain to me why they were making important decisions and how to be a professional, and then me passing that on to someone in my life, and it's incredibly rewarding. I'll end on this note, Nate. When I hire someone, within 3 to 4 months, I can tell who at my firm has had really good mentorship and who at my firm has had no mentorship and who needs it. So that's how important it is.
So sort of, and I don't want to reveal all your secrets here, Mike, but what is the sort of framework do you use to go into making those big decisions? What does it look like? What does that logical mind look like when it's at work, when you're making those big decisions?
Yeah, I don't talk much about business strategy, but I will tell you here. So I'll talk about it for maybe the first or second time ever publicly. The first thing that we're ever doing in my personal life, I'm super optimistic. I think I can, just go through the day with a positive attitude. In our professional decision making, we scan the horizon for threats. So everything we do, we say, I have someone at my firm, is usually that person, Anna Hicks Hako, say, the CIA uses the word red team. If you've watched the movie World War Z, they talk about how the Israelis have someone do this. We have someone devil's advocate every decision we make. What is the downside to doing this? And if they present a compelling downside, we don't do it. So worst case scenario, everything we do. I put online once, hey, I'm going to take a month off and watch The Witcher as a joke. Now, that seemed like a really organic thing that I said on a message board, and everyone laughed and thought it was hilarious. But I made sure someone at my firm had seen the TV show The Witcher, just to make sure there was nothing insulting. So even at the nuance level, we devil's advocate everything we do. We also hire really talented, good people who care about helping others. The most important thing you can ever do, if you're going to hang a shingle and then it's going to grow, the most important thing you can ever do is hire good talent, hire good people.
So how do you, the logical follow-up question here is, how do you hire good people? How do I identify those people who have the correct mindset, the correct work ethic, and have the correct skills for the specific position that you're actually looking to fill?
Yeah, I have a cheat. When you're in admissions, you travel with people and you get to know people. So for my 12-year, 13-year admissions career, all I did was travel with other admissions people. So at the beginning of my firm, I only hired people I had known for many years. So I knew them. I knew their integrity. I knew their ethics. I knew their strategic minds. I knew their work ethic. And now what we do is we generally hire people that other people at my firm know. So we kind of have a hack on hiring. We hire people that only people within the firm know have impeccable reputations. So do we interview them? Yes. Do we make them do assignments to assess their editing ability and all that? Yes. But we generally start from, okay, this person has a really good reputation in the industry. And I think we're sort of unique in that way. That's kind of hack. If I were ExxonMobil, I wouldn't be able to do it because I'd be hiring 3,000 people a year.
Of course. Now, you also, in 2015, were put on the board of directors as a member at Law School Transparency. Now, what is Law School Transparency, and what were you doing there as a part of their board of directors?
Yeah, so that was a great effort started by two Vanderbilt graduates, Kyle McEntee and Patrick Lynch, and I knew them from my time at Vanderbilt, and I think they had a strong board of directors, probably stronger than after they added me. It got a little diluted and weaker with my addition, but they had some really good people. I think what a lot of people don't realize is when you're on a board, you're actually they're asking you to give money or find people to give money. So when you get to your part of your career, Nate, or whoever's listening, and someone says, "Do you want to be on our board?" That's often, "Hey, you've done pretty well in your life, and you have money, and we would like for you to. So we're going to give you this great position, and then we're going to ask you for money." But to their credit, not only did Patrick and Kyle ask for money or ask for my contacts, they at times asked for strategic advice. How do we vector around this decision? And they did well enough where law school's transparency was able to, I don't want to get the legal terms wrong, but they were sold, for lack of a better word, to the Law School Admissions Council. And now they're part of that larger nonprofit organization.
So you then, in 2019, you started the Spivey blog. You're a public speaker, you're a writer, you're a podcaster. You also have the status check with Spivey Podcast. So why did you start your podcast and your blog and all that? Why did you do it in the first place?
Yeah. I mean, the blog was obvious. If we put free advice out there that only we know, and we have a lot of data the law school send us, that others send us, and we have a lot of experience, as I mentioned. If we put free advice out there that only we know, more and more people are going to go to our website, and they'll probably call us. Some people will call us. We've never paid a single. We're a business that grew from 1 person to 35 people. We make revenue over, well over the $38,000 I made my first year. I'll leave it at that. We've never paid a penny in advertising. We've never used sponsored at SEM. We've never paid for an ad. It's all because of what's called content marketing. So at first it was just giving free admissions advice. What took off in my mind as far as passion was, I noticed that society was, if you were to create in a lab, Nate, a society that was more conducive to creating stress, anxiety, hypervigilance, suicidal ideation, depression, addiction, I could go on. This is the freaking society you would create with social media. If you think about it, before social media, and there's research that backs this from the University of Michigan, most of our goals were internal, intrinsic. I'm going to go win this race, or I'm going to go make money because I gave myself. What is the least intrinsic thing, the least controllable thing? How many people are going to like my YouTube post channel? How many people are going to give me an upvote on my tweet? That is entirely extrinsic. So most of our goals now come from other based sources. It's conditioned on others. It's not conditioned on ourselves. And when you see that happening, you saw these increases in addiction, depression, anxiety increasing. So a lot of our podcasts, one of ours four now, is dedicated to psychology, mental health, and mental well-being. That's my passion. If I'm going to have the second half of my life, it's how do we, not just me, because I'm a small voice, but how do we in this industry, how do psychologists, how do we help abrupt this trend of I'm getting my love from others, not myself? And how do we give people the tools to have the self-confidence, self-esteem, get rid of the imposter syndrome? You're about to go to law school, maybe you're about to apply to law school. Imposter syndrome is like pervasive for 1L law schools, and it shouldn't be. If you're admitted to Harvard Law School, you freaking belong. If you're admitted to Drexel Law School, you freaking belong. The person to the right of you is no smarter or no less smart than you are. You're equally talented.
So in terms of, exploring this extrinsic value, this new sort of generation of value propositions for people out there, what they actually value out there in the world, if they're getting a lot of likes, if they're getting a lot of views. From your perspective, and I guess you could put it through a psychological sort of framework, what are the implications of these values changing?
Yeah, so I'll put it into 4 categories. There is performance-based esteem. Maybe you can relate to that. Did I win the race? Did I crush my interview? Did I get an A+ on the test? Okay. But this is the first 3 are going to be this is conditioned on me beating other people. So I'm a former runner. I'm a former competitive runner. Now I'm 52 and with a fractured foot and a bad back, and I'm not running right now. Do you think I could beat someone? So it's conditioned on others. It's not healthy, but for most of my life, I was very performance-based oriented. So think of it as competitive. I'm a hyper-competitive person. I'm trying really hard to tone that down. A second one is other-based esteem. Did Nate smile at me? Did that person say hi? Did my significant other text me? Okay, again, conditioned on other people. Well, if someone doesn't, if I walk past you and you don't smile at me, maybe you're just having a rotten day. Why should I care? If I love myself, it doesn't matter how that 1,000 or one person smile at me. The third kind, which I find to be the most nefarious, although our world's economy banks on it, and this is I have some other based esteem, I have some performance based esteem. If you saw my car, you can see the clothes I'm wearing. I do not have attribute based esteem. How do I look to the world? Am I wearing a Rolex? Do I have the best car, the best shirt? Did my kid go to Harvard? That is attribute based esteem. Again, conditioned on other things. That car can be taken away. Those clothes can be taken away. You're not going to look like you're 20. I mean, look at Leonardo DiCaprio. He's not quite the same guy he looks like now as he did when he's 25. These things get taken away. One day, Ryan Reynolds and Scarlett Johansson will not be attractive to the world. So I hope they have the fourth kind of esteem, which is unconditional self-love. And let me define that for you.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm here. Congrats, I made it. You're here. Congrats, Nate, you made it. No better than me, no worse. We both just belong. Let's do our thing and do it to the best of our ability. And if someone tells us we're not doing it well, yeah, maybe we'll listen to them and take their advice, but it's not going to crush our internal self-esteem, our belief system about ourselves.
So within using these three categories, clearly the fourth one is the most crucial one for people to take away. And one of the things that came up in my head when going through these different sorts of esteems that you could have, performative based, body language, and tribute based, it reminds me of one of my favorite speeches ever how am I forgetting his name? But how's the water? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, it's David Foster Water.
Thank you.
This is David Foster Wallace. This is water, and I would encourage. It was a graduation speech at I think Kenyon University. I would encourage. It's about 13 minutes, so it's not a long. I would encourage every human being on the planet to listen. That is a beautiful speech. You nailed it. This is Water by David Foster Wallace.
Yes, especially speaking about the body language part. I know he talks about, people getting cut off while they're driving, and it's like, you don't know what's going on. That person could be rushing themselves, rushing someone else to the hospital. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe someone died. You have no idea, but it's because you're so immersed in your own sort of world that it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that person did that to you when they weren't even trying to do it to you in the first place. But using these sort of four categories and specifically talking about the fourth one of fourth kindness, what sorts of things that people can do just throughout their daily life, those small incremental things they can do to ensure that they're doing their best to be fourth kindness to themselves?
Yeah, I think taking know thyself, and most of us don't. And let me say this: in my 20s, I had no concept of who I was. I was performing. I was scoring touchdowns and getting into good colleges. But deep down, I was an insecure person. I thought my girlfriend was always going to leave me for Tom Cruise or someone. I had these irrational, insecure thoughts. And at some point, I said, look, I don't feel comfortable in my own skin. Like, why am I insecure? Why am I jealous? And what that takes, and maybe it takes therapy for some people, or listening to podcasts like the ones you listen to with Tim Ferriss, who also had a lot of insecurities when he was younger. Writing books, listening to books, reading books. It takes a lot of curiosity, what I would call, and others have called, compassionate curiosity. Look at your childhood. Look at your teens. This is going to surprise you, maybe, Nate, but sometimes in my teenage years, I would get into fights with people just to show off that I could perform. I've probably been in 100 fights in my life, aged 14 to 19. Thank God I cut that out, right? Thank God I looked at myself and said, if someone tells you you suck, Spivey, why do you dive into an audience of the opposing team section and start throwing punches? True story, right? Why would it bother you? If you loved yourself, if you weren't insecure, you would laugh at someone saying. So I had to look at my own life and say, okay, well, things happened to me in my childhood where I was, had an abusive childhood. And that created a belief system that I wasn't lovable because my parents weren't there to protect me. So I said, oh, well, if my parents aren't protecting me, I must not be lovable. So if someone's going to abuse me, I better learn how to throw that punch back. That's what's called adaptive as a child. You need to protect yourself if you're abused. If you're walking around as a 30-year-old just punching people in Yankee Stadium because they say you suck, you're not going to do well in this world. So at some point, maybe not in your teens and early 20s when you're still experimenting with the external world, understandably so. We need to learn the external world. At some point, taking a look internally too. I think compassionately curious, saying, why am I being, we all have flaws. I can promise you that, you know that. Why do I have these things that keep popping up? And that's what I did. And that's what got me really into sort of maybe helping others find their own path too.
So I just want to zoom in a little more because I'm now you got me interested in all this fighting. And
Yeah.
those insecurities that are rooted within you. As you said, there were some things in your past that rooted this insecurity in you. So going beyond when you finally stop that fighting at 19 years old and you started going towards and forward in your life, how did you sort of uproot those sort of insecurities that were within you? How did you sort of reflect on yourself internally and reflect on yourself externally and be like, all right, things got to change? How
Yeah.
did that sort of process happen?
Yeah. I had to like come to grips with the fact that, look, Mike, like it's not normal for a 22-year-old college student to think of having to prove to the world that if someone insults you, you can punch them in the face and beat them up, and that's impressive. I just had lunch with my high school girlfriend 4 days ago. So we're talking 32 years ago. We met when we were 12, and the version of her that had lunch with her is an entirely different person than the poor version that dated her, who was always thinking that guys were hitting on her. So yeah, I had to say to myself, it's not appropriate as an adult to be overprotective of the people around me, to be overprotective of myself. So I solved it. I solved it when I was in my 20s. Things needed to change. And then I talked it out. Things die in the light and they grow in the dark. You can have a therapist, you can have a friend, you can have a partner, significant other, spouse, but talking things out. Look, after this Zoom is over, you and I can spend another 30 minutes talking stuff out. Find someone you trust, talk to them about things, keep working on yourself. We're all flawed people at some extent. We're all beautiful people, by the way. We're born kind and beautiful. But if I stopped being curious about myself, if I stopped listening to the same podcast, Rich Roll, Tim Ferriss, I could go on and on. If I took a month off, I would regress. My belief system would take over. And if I stopped working on myself, so that maybe the best advice I can give is once you start, don't stop.
And of course, I have to agree on all counts with that stuff. Indeed, when you start, do not stop. Have that compassion, curiosity. And I think one of the things that has been really important, a very broad point that you're making here, is that you were able to really look deep within yourself, deep within yourself, identify those insecurities, and be like, all right, something is really not right here. And of course, like you said, everything dies in light and it grows in darkness. And within that darkness, you grow out of it into the light. One of my favorite quotes ever from Carl Jung, one of my favorite psychologists ever. You are probably very familiar with him, but he says that the greatest of trees must grow, its roots must be rooted in hell in order to grow all the way to the tippy top of heaven. And I just love that quote so much
Yeah,
because
he's got a lot of good ones.
he always does. He's always ready for it. Always smacks me in the face. I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe he just said that. Now I have to think about it for the next 30 minutes. But just to switch gears a little bit, I saw something on your blog. You're talking about the law school rankings. And as I've seen looking on LinkedIn a lot of times, it's a very, very hot topic, very controversial topic. As I actually went through a sort of lecture in my college experience when someone was talking about how flawed the law school rankings are, that they do some things. But I want to ask your perspective on the law school rankings and how to sort of support people on figuring out what law schools are right for them.
Right. So let's go right back to what we were talking about. If we didn't have this attribute-based esteem, would we really care? Would we really say, oh, wow, Penn is ranked two higher than NYU? Therefore, I mean, for any individual, what some guy who's never been to law school is developing a methodology and metrics and weighting them as far as how he's going to rank law schools. This one dude has been doing it for many, many years. He never went to law school. I don't know if he can name a single 1L class. He comes up with metrics like chairs in the library. I mean, how does that like does that matter to you, Nate? How many chairs are in a library?
Not at all. It shouldn't matter to anyone.
Right. So I would say if I were to do a ranking system, now this wouldn't be so US News is a business and they like making money, and I don't hold that against them. You have to feed your family. But the best system would be to think of law schools and maybe clusters. All right. Cluster one is if I go to this school, I can probably get a job anywhere in the nation. So it's a national or global law school, not a regional law school. And maybe there's like 14 or 15 or 21 law schools in that first cluster. But it's ridiculous to say that the 10th ranked school is 13 better for Nate, or the 13th ranked school is 3 worse than the 10th ranked for Nate. Because for you, your individual desires are not what US News and World Report dictate to you. They're telling you what you should value. Should you value the GPA of the people around you? Maybe, maybe not. Because GPAs are highly inflated and pretty uniform these days. Should you value, expenditures per student? Maybe you do, but maybe you don't. So I would come up with your own system of how do I look at a cluster of law schools I'm interested in, and then obviously if you're applying to law school, don't just use rankings. What are some law schools around my GPA and LSAT where I have a good chance? What are some stretches? I like setting up my doctoral research was on goal setting. You'd be crazy not to apply to a few aspirational schools. So you might be below the medians, but those are your dream schools and you love them, not because US News and World Report tells you love that school, but because you visited and talked to the faculty and really fell in love with that school. Shoot for the stars, have some target schools, and definitely have some safeties. When people call our firm and they don't have any safety schools, we don't take them as clients. We're not going to take their money if they're going to like throw everything at their dream schools and they're 5 below both the median LSAT and 3 below the median GPA, 3/10 below. We're probably not going to take them as a client. We're not going to take their money if they're only going to apply to stretch schools. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does make sense. It was actually the answer that I was looking for. Not that I was looking for one, but it sounded very right to me through my own personal experience and the experience of others that I've heard from. Now, in particular with your consulting firm, you how do you sort of find that ideal client? How do you find that person where, okay, we're going to take you in? What are some specific either skills that they have or specific just sorts of things? What things are you looking for when you're looking for a great client to bring on and help out?
Yeah, my definition of an ideal client would be someone who needs our help. So if you have a 180 and a 4.0 and you're a pretty good writer, that's not an ideal client because you might want to like buy our book for $40 or whatever it is, but you certainly don't need to talk to a consultant every week. I like people. I like people who have a range of schools, and maybe their safeties they're at like 85% likely, but they would like to get a lot more money from their safeties, and they have no idea how to scholarship negotiate because I've done it for 26 straight years. They've done it never times. I'll make up a grammatically incorrect sentence. So they have those safeties where we can probably jack up their scholarship money in case they want to go with a full scholarship, or if they want to use that to leverage negotiation for their target schools or stretch schools. And my ideal client is maybe at 50% for their target schools, and we can make 50% more likely than 50% because we're going to button up every part of their application. So now their target schools are becoming more likely. And let's say they're at 45% for their stretch schools, their dream schools. I'd love to have them kill their interview, kill their application, not make it boring or not use overly, bloviate. I like to use words that you should never use in an application. Bumptious and bloviating and overwrought. Do not use those words in your application. But people think they have to impress an admissions committee when really they should be writing for themselves. The best applications are when you're writing for yourself because you're not speaking to this unknown audience who you don't know. You're writing about what you're passionate about. Your best personal statement topic would be podcasting because that's what you're passionate about. So let's take your passions and your sincerity, your authentic voice that AI can't write because AI doesn't know you. Only you know you. Let's take that 47% chance for your dream school and turn it into a 50% chance or 51%. Anyone out there, and I see these scammers all the time, that says, okay, your personal statement is 80% of the admissions decision. That's a lie. But do you want to, maybe it's 20% of the initial decision. Let's kill that 20%. So then if you're 49% at your dream school, let's make it 51%. And that's what we do as a firm. And that's really, it's not quite as fun to me as the podcasting with the experts on mental health. There's only one run down. It's still incredibly fun helping people. Like the day you get the phone call, and I've had thousands of these now in my life, from someone that got into their dream school, what a gift that is to me. I get to share in their joy.
Of course. I mean, is that one of the inspirations behind starting your consulting group, is the joy that you feel, or was it something that came with the process of starting it up and getting clients and beginning that journey?
Yeah, I'm not a business person by nature. So, I was a higher education person. I thought the most rewarding thing at my firm was going to be sharing in that joy. Now, what I found is the most rewarding thing is also helping people with their whole lifetime. Look, I can crush your application for a cycle, but I can also have Dr. Judson Brewer, one of the world's leading experts on anxiety, help you handle anxiety for your lifetime. And I find both of those really rewarding.
So through your podcast, you do a ton of mental health stuff, as you said, a ton of stuff on psychology. You actually had one of my favorite people ever, Gabor Mate, one of my favorites ever. I love his book. I love all of his podcasts. I've listened to a lot of them because he is just wonderful and he speaks volumes to me in terms of what he talks about. But on your Spivey blog, you do short stories and thoughts to make your day just a bit more thoughtful and happy. And one of the articles that I saw, you talked about Nietzsche's flat circle. Now, I've read a lot of Nietzsche in my life, but I've never heard about the flat circle. I don't know how I've missed it, but you said it's actually the opposite of love. And I want to ask, this is like the most personal interest question I've ever done on this podcast, but what do you mean by it's the opposite of love?
Yeah, so the flat circle became popularized by the TV show True Detective. And the meth addict, who they thought was the murderer, said to Matthew McConaughey's character, time is a flat circle. And what he was saying is time just repeats itself over and over again. You're going to live this over and over again. And my point with love is the opposite, is love is permanent, non-repeating. If I love you, I don't, so I'm sorry, but maybe we'll get to know each other and I'll love you like a brother. But, that person who I had lunch with 4 days ago, I'll love her for the rest of my existence. So it's not repeating, it's consistently permanent. That's what I meant by that. The permanence of love is a big deal to me. I can't prove that love is permanent, but I've written a blog in there, Does True Love Exist?, where I tried to write, you're a philosophy major, I tried to come up with an ontological proof of love, that love is permanent. So, Descartes tried to come up with a proof that God is real. Maybe he succeeded, maybe he didn't. And one of the things I like to write about is the permanence of love. It's the opposite of repeating. It is not. It's just to me, it's vertical lines. I might love 12 people, and those are vertical lines. They're not a flat circle. This is why it's the opposite. But you can visualize it. A flat circle is repeating. Vertical lines, if I've loved 12 people, are infinitely going always in the same direction. They're permanent. They're continuous. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but
my blog might describe it a little better because I put some thought into it and wrote it.
Of course. But I have to ask a follow-up question because now I'm hooked. I'm hooked now. I'm hooked in. But do you think, in terms of thinking about the permanence of love, if it keeps going up, do you think it can ever stop? Could you ever stop loving someone?
Yeah, I can. It is my belief that the people who I've loved, no matter what they do to me, and they have, good or bad, I will love them forever. Once I love someone, I can't unlove them. Now, that's not necessarily all good. Like, you don't want to, suffer through a divorce, and I have not. And then, the other person get happily married and be calling them every week saying, do you love me? Do you love me? But I have a belief system that if that person loved me, they love me forever. And if I love them, I love them forever. Now, this might not be right. I'm not saying, and Gabor Mate, who's kind of like a mentor, for lack of a better word, of mine. He and I don't hang out. I have talked to him privately. It's not like he's God. He says a lot of things with such conviction that you kind of are like, oh man, Mate must be right. No, he's coming up with his beliefs, and I'm coming up with my beliefs. I don't know if I'm right, but yeah, that's my belief. Love is permanent.
Law students, are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or short on time in law school? Maybe you just want someone to show you a step-by-step framework to master the topics you're learning in your classes. I know the pressure you're under, and I've got the perfect solution for you. My course, The Law School Operating System, is proven to help you conquer law school with confidence and ease.
Created by Lisa Blasser, a former guest on the podcast and founder of the Law School Success Institute, this course breaks down every subject into manageable main topics that you run through a comprehensive study system to thoroughly prepare you for class and final exams. No more feeling like you need to know everything all at once in the beginning.
But that's not all, Nate. The Law School Operating System also teaches you how to schedule your studying and time effectively. For every topic, you'll know which study step you're on and when you'll complete it every week of your semester. No more mad dash cram sessions, more time with your loved ones. And with my system, you'll walk into your exams knowing you've given 100% of yourself, that there's nothing more you could have done to succeed, and there's no better confidence than that.
Lisa breaks it down like this: one class, one list of main topics, and one system to master each topic. With recorded and live sessions for students available on her website and partnerships with law schools nationwide, the Law School Operating System is here to help you thrive from day one to the final exam. Ready to take control of your law school journey and operate at your full potential in law school? Visit www.lisablasser.com today and enroll in the Law School Operating System. Be sure to use code LSOSNATE10 at checkout for 10% off the recorded course. That is code LSOSNATE10 at checkout. Now, back to the show. And talking to him privately, how was that? I just have to ask the first question, how was that? I mean, that was probably amazing.
It was surreal. As you know, I mean, many of your listeners might not know, but Dr. Gabor Mate is a legend. I mean, he's been on Ferris, Rich Roll. He's written 4 best-selling books. So imagine writing 1 best-selling book. In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts was translated into 50-something languages. It's sold all over the world. It's probably the world's foremost leading book on addiction. So, and he was one of our podcast's first celebrity guests. So it was pretty. I have a picture of me and Dr. Mate, and then Anna Hicks-Hako, our COO at the time, the 3 of us on the Zoom. And that picture is dear to my heart because it felt surreal. He's a tough freaking interview. He puts you on the spot.
Oh, wow. Oh, well, listen, maybe one day, who knows? But Mike, we're now down to our last 5 questions here. The first of the 5 questions, I'll try to frame it in a way that supports what you do and, allows you to give an answer that will give tremendous value to our audience here. But it is sort of the text that question, because as time has gone on, as I've done this podcast, many new technologies and new softwares have come out. As you said before, AI doesn't know us very well. We know ourselves very well, but it is a tool at the end of the day that can provide a lot of value to people. So what does your tech stack look like? What kind of recommendations do you have for people in terms of technologies, new or old, whatever they may be? What are the recommendations you have?
Yeah, I'm going to have a podcast next month with a guy named David Weinstein, who has started a foundation called Write the World. And we're going to talk a lot about what AI he uses. He teaches high school students how to write, and he's a champion of using AI, but having a conversation with it, a critical conversation. So, and he uses the whatever, Chat GPT-3 or whatever the most recent version is. Obviously, we've had AI, for lack of a better word, for many, many years. We've had Google Docs and Grammarly. I mean, that's artificial intelligence telling us what we were doing wrong. We've had tools, and tools are valuable. The problem is, in the near future, there's no way for you to upload all your life experiences into AI with the current technology. That would take all your life, right? It wouldn't be very efficient. So I would say, use tools like AI, but if you're applying to law school and you think using only AI and not your critical self, and David Weinstein on our podcast is going to talk about this next month, only submitting an AI, like admissions committees are going to recognize that in a heartbeat and dislike you off the planet. Use your authentic voice. Let AI write some sentences for you if they're doing a good job of the opening sentence and you're freaked out and all you can come up with is it was a dark and stormy night. Let AI help, but use your authentic voice. Let others read that and not a machine. Think about it. It's humans who are reading your application. If AI was reading your application, then sure, use AI, because AI would admit AI, but a human being is not going to admit AI. They're going to admit Nate. Is that helpful?
It absolutely was helpful, and it just goes to that bigger point of it is a tool at the end of the day. You can't let it do absolutely everything, but if you want a couple ideas, you use it. I use it a lot for that. I use it a lot for inspiring ideas. I've done a lot of research into it. I've seen what it's capable of. Actually, one of the big things I've learned thus far is that if you type at the beginning, especially with any of like the GBTs that are out there, there's so many different products now, but if you type, take a deep breath, and then you write whatever you're prompted, it is the most accurate that it will make it. I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense, but it's just how it goes. And a lot of the time I use, inspiration. So I'll say, come up with these ideas inspired by the likes of, Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan, whatever it may be. And that helps it a lot because you're sort of using the great minds, the great human minds that exist on this planet to sort of inspire the ideas that the GBT spits out. So it's interesting on that front. It's a very interesting thing. It's always evolving. It's always getting better or worse, whatever it may be. But as you said, only the future will tell. Only time will tell. So fourth to last question here, Mike, live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast. What is your book recommendations for people? Doesn't have to be about the law, just some of your favorite books, something you give a gift to someone.
Man, you couldn't stop me. I mean, I'm reading. Well, to begin with, read. And if you're not reading, get Audible or whatever and listen to books. There's no difference, Nate, between not knowing how to read and not reading. There's no difference. So if you can read, if you know how to read, that's a gift that some adult bestowed upon you when you were a child. Use that gift. So I'm always reading 3 books at one time. There's one I'm listening to right now on Audible. There's one I'm reading, you saw it, the biography of Bruce Lee. And then I always have some fantasy book I'm reading at night to put me to sleep because it detaches from all the work stresses that you'll soon be facing, or as a lawyer will be facing. So what are the best books that I would recommend? There's a book called Brain Rules by Joseph Medina is the name of the author. I've been recommending that for years because it teaches you how to think at your best. One example would be, and this is true for me, I used to be a runner, but I have some injuries. But if I'm running in the mountains, my best business strategy always came from those runs. We have 300,000 years of evolutionary hardwire to be on the move. So of course your blood is flowing to your brain and you're firing the best thoughts on the move. That's one example of 1,000 from that book, Brain Rules, of how to do your best thinking. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, obviously you've heard of. It sticks with you for life, kind of like that David Foster Wallace speech. When Breath Becomes Air, I'm blanking on the author's name, but someone with a doctor with a terminal cancer who wrote a book while he was dying. If you want to just kind of like learn to live in the present. There's a book by Leslie Jameson, who's an author I'd love to have on our podcast. Shout out to anyone who might know her or her email address, right? Okay, so I think it's called The Recovering. If you want to learn how to be a good writer, Stephen King's On Writing or Leslie Jameson's The Recovering that's just like writing as good as it gets.
Those are fantastic recommendations.
Read the Bruce Lee out of the Polly is the name of the author, I believe, Polly. Any person who is legend for life for many lifetimes probably did some things you want to look into and say, I can do that too. I can like aspire to emulate some of their success. This Bruce Lee biography I'm reading is just fascinating. He was a frail guy. He was a tiny, frail guy. You look at his movies and he's ripped. That took getting up at 3 a.m. and working out for 3 hours. And then from 6 to 9 p.m., he would work out for 3 hours. Chuck Norris said, no one was as fanatical about getting in shape as Bruce Lee. You don't know that when you watch the movies.
No, I mean, that's fascinating. All these books will soon enough end up in my Amazon cart. Do not Do not worry, Mike. Especially the brain rules one. That one's
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah.
I'm really interested in that one just because it has to do with the brain and good ideas, and I like coming up with good ideas, and I need new ways to come up with good ideas. So, third to last question here, Mike. What are these sorts of things that you consume, not food, consume on a daily basis, either that be through social media, so, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, any
Yeah.
substance, any podcasts that you recommend? What is crossed in the transom of Mike's mind on a daily basis?
Yeah. And considering that growth is really important to me, I do consume some things, but every time you say yes to something, you're saying no, so you can't consume everything. So I get James Clear's email once a week. He wrote Atomic Habits. I get the Tim Ferriss emails, Ryan Holiday's emails. Ryan's a prolific writer. The opposite. Oh, there's another book, The Obstacle is the Way. How to take like your worst challenge and make it actually like meaningful and live your best life through your worst challenge. So I get Ryan Holiday's emails. I listen to Rich Roll's podcast. Rich Roll is as you know, because we talked about it, a fantastic podcaster. Dr. Peter Attia, but he has self-help, but it's more on longevity and well-being. I read prolifically, so you already know that I'm reading 3 books. At any given time, there are 3 books that I'm reading every day. So did those podcasts help? Rich Roll, Attia's The Drive. Tim Ferriss has a good one. Joe Rogan's controversial, but I do have a podcast, and Joe Rogan is an exceptional podcaster. I'm not talking about his belief system. I'm talking about his podcast. So I like how he titrates his pace and his storytelling and how much time he lets the guests speak versus how much time. So if you want to be a podcaster, I would say go listen to Joe Rogan. He's great at podcasting.
He's one of I think he is the best in the world. He is the highest paid. So he definitely has a ton of insights just in the way that he speaks, not even the things that he's saying, but the way that he does it makes it so important. I listen to him just for that fact, just sort of analyzing the question that he does, sort of pacing that he had, just like you said. Now, second to last, and to go back, the Rich Roll podcast, my favorite episode from the Rich Roll podcast is the one he had with Peter Attia. I was left in tears, but it was an amazing, amazing podcast because Peter Attia talks about the struggles that he had a couple of years ago with his his newborn child that had some struggles. He was in New York, he was putting everything off, and he had totally crazy breakdown, had to go to rehab, whole thing. But the story is amazing, and I couldn't recommend that specific episode more than anything else. But second class question here, Mike. You're working, you got your consulting group, you're reading all these books, but what does an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for Mike?
It would be hiking deep in the mountains with someone I really care about and just talking about life, psychology, growth, connections, relationships. And I just did that 2 days ago, so I know what an ideal day looks like. It's when I can actually. So there's a trail in Colorado I hike, and there's a spot where I lose cellular connection, so no work emergency can hit me, no life emergency can hit me, and if I'm with a friend, we just keep hiking for an hour or 2. I once did that hike with a big law lawyer, and once he hit that spot, he was like, I got to turn around. He didn't have it in him to go off the grid. So my ideal Friday night would be off the grid.
Mike, I'm adapting this to my own routine over here. I'll be going off the grid soon enough. I'll find some deep forest in upstate New York, and I'll be walking around with someone I love, and it will be great and fun. We'll be talking about the things I usually talk about because those are usually the substance of my conversations as well. I love talking about philosophy, psychology, all that fun stuff. Just get deeply entrenched in those kind of conversations. It's the best. But Mike, final question here. I do this at the end of every single episode. But what are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, the legal professionals, and pretty much anyone else out there?
Yeah. When I was the age that most people are applying to law school, I saw things as zero sum. So if I don't get into the best school, my life is going to be diminished if I don't perform. And what I would say is, having done this now for 27 years, most of the lawyers, not most, the incredible majority did not go to their dream school. When I was at Vanderbilt, those kids wanted to go to Harvard or Penn. When I was at WashU, they wanted to go to Vanderbilt or NYU. But guess what? I stay in touch with a lot of my former students. they're doing no different having gone to Vanderbilt than had they gone to Harvard. In fact, a lot of the students that transferred to Harvard ended up regretting it and staying in touch and saying, yeah, you know. So if you don't get into your just maybe amp down the pressure you put on yourself. It's okay to strive to get into the best schools, but as far as pressure, you're going to be what your life is, not what one school resume or one school hanging behind your office chair says you are. You're going to be what your life is. So my one word of wisdom is live for your eulogy. Don't live for your resume.
Oh, wow. I might have to steal that quote, Mike, because that was amazing. It was beautifully, beautifully said. But that is the podcast. That is the episode. So, Mike, thanks so much for coming on here, spreading your wisdom, spreading your experiences. And for everyone out there listening, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com, lawyersinthemaking, one word, substack.com. And I will see you all in the next one.